Looking at the screen, you can see that the windows that I'm going to talk about are not conventional stained glass windows that you would find upstairs, for example, in St. John's Church. The parish was had been through some bad times, let's put it that way, with poor leadership. And when I took it on, it was a mess, and it took me a couple of years to get it working. And the ladies came to me. It's always the ladies. The ladies came to me and said, our church is colorless. We want some color in it. So I said, well, what do you propose? They said, stained glass windows. Ha ha ha. I said, do you know what stained glass windows cost? They said, no. I said, you couldn't afford them. Well, they said, there must be a cheaper way. There's always a better way. So I went out looking around and found a studio up in Wisconsin who agreed to work with us. Now, we did all of this. We didn't borrow a penny. We did it all pay as you go. And it was a very, very hard working parish. Wonderful people. We didn't have anyone with deep pockets to come forward when we got into trouble and pay us out. We did everything on the money that came in the offering plates. And so I got working with this studio, and they built a sample window for us. We looked at it. He put a price on it, and I said, you're several $100s off. So we went away and came back with a second window, and I'll show both of those to you in a few minutes. How this worked was, I decided that we would have on the east side of the building would be the Old Testament windows, and on the other side of the window would be the New Testament windows. And I was trying to get something that could be used as instruction purposes, in addition to giving them the color that they wanted. We were a wonderful parish, and hardworking, and the best thing was they trusted me, and that was a big help. And the other thing was I loved them, and that was a big help. The way this is put together, this document I'm going to show you, is as if we were walking through the church. And as we go along, we'll talk about each of the windows as we pass them. The funds were all donated entirely by members or friends of the parish, and in many cases in memory of a family. There are a total of 26 locations where panels contain representations of persons or events taken from Holy Scripture. Subjects of the windows on the east wall, as I say, are Old Testament, and the west wall, New Testament. So let's take a look and see what we've got. First window, please. Mm-hmm. As we enter the church, you're on the ground floor, as it were. You enter the church by walking up a short staircase, and as you go along on the right-hand side is this window. And it represents St. Mary greeting her cousin, St. Elizabeth. St. Elizabeth and her husband had been waiting for years to have a family. Nothing happened, but when Mary greeted Elizabeth, suddenly Elizabeth realized she was with child, and she said, Hail Mary, blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. That's where this parish gets its name, from St. Elizabeth. Mm. Second picture, as you turn from the top of the steps to your right is the tree of life. And it is represented at the base of the cross is the open book, which is the Bible. On the left-hand arm is the alpha symbol from the Greek alphabet. On the right arm is the symbol for the omega, and at the top is the communion and wafer and chalice. And then as you progress then towards the east wall, I asked them on this first window that they made what they wanted on it. They said they'd like to have a mother and child. So this I called the Madonna window. And this was the first window that I told them was too expensive. And we found a way of cutting some things out of it that we wouldn't do with every window. And some of the things were these symbols that you see around the edge of we called them the middle part here, the medallion. Around the medallion there are symbols representing all the works that the women do in the parish. Ladies, look at it carefully. See if I missed any. So that was the first window, and I told them it was too expensive, so they said they'd build a second one. And what did you want in the medallion on the second window? And I said, well, that's going to go into the room we call the sacristy or the vestry, where the priest's robes were stored in a closet, and all of the altar things, the chalices and so on and so forth, stored in cupboards where the altar guild would have them. So that window is stripped down version, and this is the window that we could afford. Now, I said we decide the windows on the east wall be Old Testament. How does the Old Testament begin? It begins with creation. Now, what we would do, I would scratch out or draw as best I could what I wanted in the medallion, and I'd send that into the studio where the work was being done. They would do the best with their artists to straighten up my horrible drawing and send me back what's called a cartoon. It's a black and white life-size of the window that was going to be built. And so this was my representation of creation. It's the hand of God reaching down to the earth, through the heavens, to the earth and the seas. And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the Spirit of God went upon the face of the waters. And God saw, and behold, it was all very good. So what comes after creation? The flood. So Noah is called by God and told to build an ark, take your family and 2 of each of the animals into the ark, because there was going to be a big flood. 40 days and 40 nights it rained, and the ark floated on the waters, and Noah and his family were safe. And God said, and there shall be in the sky clouds a bow. And I said, okay, that would be a rainbow. So I put a rainbow over the ark, signifying that word of God that he swore he would look after the people if they obeyed him. Next, God speaks with Moses. And the angel of the Lord appeared and there was a bush, and Moses saw the bush, and the bush was on fire, but it didn't burn. It was not consumed. And the voice of God came out of the bush and spoke with Moses. And the Lord said, that's a little hard reading up here. And God came down to deliver them out of the lands of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land as a good and broad land. So that's right here. No. So God gave them the land known as Israel. But God wasn't through with Moses yet. He took him up on the high mountain and spoke with him and gave them the law. And the 10 Commandments were carved in stone and given to Moses. And so here we have my representation of the 10 Commandments. Then we have this nation of Israelites. They're a feisty bunch. They're fighting amongst themselves, and they're fighting with all the neighbors and so on. And finally, the country descends upon them and charges them with let's go to war. And they had a huge giant of a man. And none of the Israelites would go up against him. They knew that they couldn't fight him, except there was a young lad named David, and he was a shepherd. He was used to fighting off the mountain lions and wolves and so forth that came to attack his sheep, and he wasn't afraid of this huge soldier. So he picked up a rock, put it in his sling, twirled it around, and hit the giant Goliath and killed him. And the Israelites were really impressed by this, so they made him king. David was the first king of Israel. He unified all of the 10 tribes and put them together into a nation, selected Jerusalem as the capital, and on the medallion you'll see a crown signifying he was king, and there's a shepherd's staff showing that he had been a shepherd. There's a spear showing he was a warrior. There's a harp because he was a musician, not a magician. Getting 10 tribes of Israelites together as a nation, I would say it took a magician, but anyway, so he had unified them, and they took the Star of David, and that, of course, is on the flag of Israel to this day. After the kings came prophets. Now, prophets did not foretell the future except to warn the people if they didn't obey God, they would be in trouble. And I selected as my sample prophet the prophet Isaiah. Now, the people said, we've got to have somebody to talk to God, to go as a go-between us and God. And Isaiah said, "Here am I, Lord, send me." So they sent him, but when he got to speak to God, he said, "Woe is me, for I am a man of unclean lips." And he felt that he had to have a pure mouth and lips to speak with God. So one of the seraphim angels came out of heaven, down, took a burning coal out of the altar fire, and put it on Isaiah's mouth, purifying his mouth. A pretty tough way to get your mouth cleaned out. I would have thought a good dose of Listerine would have done the job, but God works in different ways from us. And so this picture, this window, is a scroll representing the prophet Isaiah, and tongs holding a burning coal, and the altar fire below it. So, we've come to the end of the Old Testament part of the windows, and we're going to transition now into the New Testament. And how does it transition in the Bible from Old to New? It goes through the four Gospelers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So that's what we have here. Two windows, Matthew and Mark, and the next window is Luke and John. Matthew being the tax collector, Mark being the evangelist, Luke is known as the physician, and John, the youngest of the apostles, and he is the only apostle that stayed with Jesus right the way through. He was at the foot of the cross when Jesus was crucified. You notice there's a change now in the way the windows are designed. They're full figure. These are right up by the altar in the church. So there's a change in the way they're put together. Whether they charged more for them, I can't remember or not. But we put them on up there and they got paid for. I'll say this. We didn't borrow a penny. We didn't get any big, deep-pocketed parishioner to help us out. Everything was pay as you go. As we turn away from the gospel windows, we pass this window, which is Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ. Her color was blue. So that's why this is a blue window. And now we walk, actually in the church, we walk behind the altar, across the church, to the other side. And there we're greeted by a window with Jesus giving us a blessing. What's the next number here? Now, we've got a whole wall of windows. What are we going to fill them with? Now, I had a lot of conversations with people. I didn't have a bunch of committees. Committees are wonderful. They do what they want to do, but not necessarily what they were formed for. We all know that. So I worked with just a group of people. Maybe after coffee hour someday, we'd sit down and talk about, well, what are we going to put in the next windows, guys? And we'd talk it through, and they would come up with ideas. And I said, okay, the New Testament, what do you think about? Oh, and they said, oh, we think about this and that and the other thing. And they said, oh, how about miracles? So I said, okay, miracles. Now, what was Jesus' first miracle? Changing water into wine. So here we have Jesus blessing the water pots and changing the water into wine, which at the wedding in Cana of Galilee, where this miracle occurred, was very interesting. The man in charge of the feast told the bridegroom, hey, you saved the best wine to the end, because usually they serve the good wine at the front. After everybody had drunk that and gotten drunk, then they'd bring in the old wine. But in this case, the blessed water becoming wine was the best of it all. Now, the second miracle we talked about, and they said, oh, that's the feeding of the 5,000. How did he do that? I said, okay, let's have a window. So I sent a drawing to the studio, what I thought it should be, and they drew the cartoon, as it's called, and sent it back. But about that time, we had an unfortunate thing happen in the parish. A young mother lost her baby, and the baby was a boy. And I thought, well, this is a good time to make an example, and I called the studio up and said, have you started cutting glass on the multitudes window yet? And they said, no. I said, okay, send me the cartoon back, which they did, and I sketched in on their cartoon a young lad standing beside Jesus. There are two stories of the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the multitude, and in one of them, St. Andrew brings to Jesus a boy who has so many loaves and so many fishes, and that is what Jesus used to feed the multitude. And we had the young lad on the window. Though he didn't survive in life, he survives on the windows. And I called him Jason. So we could have gone on for the rest of the windows with miracles. They're all through the New Testament. But I decided that we could do something different. I said, all right, what are you impressed with? Some of the people said, in the New Testament this, the New Testament that. And somebody said, the Transfiguration. Always wondered about that. And the lady, Eileen White was her name, said she'd pay for the window of Transfiguration. So I sketched out what I thought it should be, sent it in, and they produced the cartoon, sent it back, and I approved it. They built the window, and I called Eileen up. I said, come on over, Eileen, your window is here. So she came over, and she sat down and looked at it, and finally she said, what are the bowling balls doing over Jesus' head? I said, Eileen, those aren't, but that's the storm that came up when the Transfiguration took place. Oh, she says, oh, storm to you, bowling balls to me. I said, we can send it away and have it redone if you don't like it. Oh, no, it's all right. She says, you get your bowling balls. We had a good understanding in this parish, believe me. Then another one of the ladies, I can't remember her name. I took care of her will when she died. I can't remember her name, but she said she had seen a picture somewhere of Jesus standing, knocking on the door. I said, well, what did that mean to you? She says, I kind of think it might be Jesus knocking on the door of my heart to let me in. I said, good. So we'll do a window of Jesus knocking on the door. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come to let him come to me, and we shall have sup together. And so there is I wish I could remember her name. Anyway, that was the standing at the door window. So now I said, wait a minute, we've cherry-picked some ideas here, but I'd like to have some discipline in the rest of the windows. And I said, what can we use? And again, we met together and chatted this all through. And finally, I said, how about the seasons of the church year, giving us some discipline? And they said, oh, very good. So we decided on the seasons of the church year. And what is the first one? Advent, right. And we do that with an Advent wreath and 4 candles. The 4 candles representing the 4 weeks before Christmas. Each candle lighted, a new candle each week until all 4 are lighted. And Advent is a period of waiting, anticipating, waiting for the coming of the Messiah. And after that, of course, it comes Christmas. And so Christmas was easy. I decided just to do the Holy Family. We could have done angels and shepherds and animals and so on and so forth. I decided it would be simple just to have the Holy Family and the star that appeared over the manger. And that would be the Christmas season window. Then the next season after Christmas is a season of Epiphany, which means a showing forth. Up to now, the only people who have seen the Christ was the Holy Family, of course, and the shepherds and the angels. But it was time for the general population, the Gentile world, to be exposed to Jesus. So there was a bunch of wise men, they're called in the Bible, living in the East, who saw the star, and they followed that star to the birthplace of Jesus. And when they came to the house where Mary was with the child, now notice it says the house, not a stable, it's a house. And he's not a baby, he's a child. So there's a time lapse between birth and the showing forth. Now, it says 3 wise men from the East. I didn't know how to draw a wise man. Being one myself, I found it very difficult to do. And so I said they came out of the East, so they better they're going to be kings. I'm going to have, because we have this wonderful carol that we sing at the Epiphany, We 3 Kings of Orient Are. So I took that as my cue for the Epiphany window. Now, they had, coming from the East, these kings had to look like Eastern kings. And so what you see is my representation of what Eastern kings' crowns would look like. And the studio helped me a little bit with the shaping of this, but we have the star that the wise men followed, and there are 3 Eastern crowns. Now, what happens to a Jewish baby after he's been born? Well, he has a circumcision. Now, I didn't think I could show that on the window too well, so we just jumped over that and went straight to his baptism. So, and to show the baptism, now we all know that Jesus was baptized in the River Jordan by John the Baptist. Now, how I was going to show the River Jordan and John the Baptist and Jesus, I thought, a baptism. What do we think of? We think of a font. So my symbol for the baptism is a font. But when Jesus came up out of the water, it says, a dove descended from the heavens, the Spirit descended upon him. So I have the dove down onto the surface of the water for the baptism of Jesus. Do you think we're getting enough color on our windows? There's lots of color. The next thing, the event that we decided to show was the Last Supper. Now, the Last Supper was the apostles were preparing a Passover feast for Jesus, and there were 12 apostles, and so we have 12 crosses around the medallion, and the center of the medallion is the symbol for Christ, the cross, anyway, those are representing Jesus. My recall mechanism is not working quite right. So we have that as our Last Supper. But around the center medallion, there are 12 crosses. 11 of them are gold. 1 is black. Because during the meal, Jesus said, one of you is going to betray me. And so the black cross represents Judas Iscariot, the person who betrayed Jesus. And he is memorialized on the window as a black cross. Then we have the Good Friday, follows after the Last Supper, and it's the three crosses, Jesus on the center cross, and the two bandits, or malefactors as they're called in the Bible, one on either side. And a storm arose when he was on the cross, and they put a sign on the cross above him that said, "This is Jesus, your King of the Jews." And that's the way he was left. And after the crucifixion, of course, is Easter Sunday. Now, Easter Sunday, how am I going to depict that? I can't draw a cave with a boulder rolled away and the three women going in to prepare Jesus' body for burial. So I said, what do we think of it at Easter time? To us, it's the Easter lily. So the Bible says, "And the angel answered and said unto them," anyway, there's a quote from the Bible, I can't read it. The Easter lily becomes the final window that I made, that I designed for the church. And we've been through about 25 of them now up to this point. But it's not the last window. There's at the time I took the parish over, they had no stained glass at all clear glass. But they did have a stained glass panel that they moved around within the church from one window to another, letting the light shine through it. And I said, where'd that come from? They said, oh, it came out of the house of one of the original parishioners. I said, okay, that deserves to be treated properly, and I sent it to the studio where work was being done and asked them to frame it, to first of all repair it because it had been knocked about, and put a proper frame on it, which they did. And then I said, I want you to make a second window as close to the original as you can get it. But the original shows Jesus holding a lamb and surrounded by sheep. I wanted Jesus surrounded by children. So that is the second window. These follow the more traditional stained glass. And that window, the parish did not pay for. I paid for, and that was my gift to the parish, bringing this whole episode to a wonderful end. Great people, wonderful parishioners, loved them dearly, still do. If you've got any questions, I'm going to do my best to answer them, or any comments. If they're bad, don't bother. If they're good, thank you.
Father Mike, from beginning to end, how long did this take?
About 5 years, because we did it a bit at a time. As I said, we were not a rich parish at all. If we wanted anything done, we had to do it with the money that we had available. I was trying to think back to our bank account, and I don't think I can remember any time where our bank account was over $60,000. For the first 6 years, I was not paid. I was working for a computer company, and I was being paid by them. That was the way I supported the family up to that point. Then they got to the point where they said, we'll go into a 3-year program. At the end of 3 years, we'll pay you the regular salary. Well, the 3-year program became a 5-year program, and the 5-year program became a 6. Anyway, finally, the year before I left, I received the first year's salary. But that wasn't what I was after. I wasn't after I wanted the experience of raising this group of wonderful people, hardworking. I'll tell you some of the other things we did. The church building had a flat roof when I took it over, leaked like a sieve. So we put a peaked roof on it. The cellars filled up with water every time it rained, so we put sumps in and sump pumps in, and a complete underground water system to drain the water away. The parking lot was gravel. We put blacktop down for the whole. The church itself inside, I said to them one day, I said, you know, your church is backwards. They said, what do you mean? I said, you've got the altar at the wrong end of the building. Oh, how should it be? So I drew a picture. I was great at drawing pictures. As long as somebody else did the work. And showed them what I thought, how I thought it should be. And to change it, they had to unscrew from the concrete floor all of the pews, pick them up, turn them around. None of the holes for the new screws would match the old screw holes. Of course not. We had to drive all new screws into the concrete floor, which they did. They did it all in 2 weeks. At 12 o'clock at night, I would go over to the church, and there they would be, laying on the floor. I think I bought every cement drill bit in this city of Redford, probably Plymouth, Livonia, Northville. We wore out so many concrete drill bits, it wasn't funny. But within 2 weeks, the pews were all in place. We built a new altar. Well, we didn't build a new altar. Somebody donated a beautiful altar for us. And a lectern. Somebody else donated chairs for the acolytes. Somebody donated those. A cross to hang above the new altar. Somebody donated that. Oh, that's funny. The same lady that donated the bowling balls donated the cross to hang over the church, and I hung it up, and she looked at it, where's the rest of it? I said, what do you mean? She said, the circle isn't there behind the cross, and she wanted a, what's it called, Father?
Celtic cross.
A Celtic cross, that's right. And I had just given her a regular cross. So down came that cross, and look what the new one. But that's the way these people were. If they thought something needed to be done, out came the money from somewhere. I had no idea. I'm sure it was all honestly gained. Though I know they did go to the Northville racetrack occasionally. Yes, but they were wonderful people, and after 13 years I decided to retire, which I did. Unfortunately, the successors that followed me were not, they had no leadership, didn't know how to lead these people, and the parish now is no longer an Episcopal church. It's a for sale building in Redford, and the windows are still in it. The parish that's in it now is I don't know what denomination, what brand of Christian they are, but I have called on them 3 times and visited with them to let them know the story of the windows. I figured if they're going to worship in the building with the windows, they ought to know what is going on around them. And so it is a Christian community occupying it, but the building is owned by the diocese, and I'm sure if somebody made them an offer, they'd be glad to sell it. And then where would my windows go? But I can't worry about that now. I'm through worrying about that. Any further comments?
Oh, yeah. Just had a question.
Yes.
So roughly how much was each window?
How much?
Yeah.
Well, I can't remember exactly, but this is back in the 70s and 80s, probably around $1,600, something like that, or maybe not that much. But the people came up with the money. They were all, the parish, I didn't have any doctors in the parish. I didn't have any deep pockets in the parish. I had one lawyer and a few teachers, a few nurses, hospital workers, line men working on the automobile factories. One man I remember was the maintainer for all the presses at the news of the world, the news, Detroit News. His job was to keep those presses running, and that sort of thing. Carpenters, plumbers, so forth. But they were the absolute wonderful people. When I took it over, I had congregations of maybe 30, 40 people. When I finished, we had congregations of 120. We had a Sunday school running into the 20s and 30s. But as I say, after I left, things, poor leadership, and it is now, as I say, in the hands of whoever wants to buy it. Okay? Anything else?
I'll put in one word about St. Elizabeth's, my interaction with it. I was in seminary, and Father Bedford's parish raised money for seminarians, to support seminarians. And so he contacted Bishop McBurney, the Bishop of Quincy, who was the bishop who had adopted me. And as Bishop McBurney tells the story, Father Mike said, "Do you have anybody who's worthy of some financial aid? I have money for them." And Bishop McBurney said, "I don't have anybody who's worthy, but I have needy seminarians." And so I was the recipient of $1,000 from your parish, about half the price of a window, and that went towards my tuition when I was at Nashotah House. And who would have thought that when I showed up here as the rector of St. John's, I got the greatest gift from St. Elizabeth, which was Father Mike and Mary. God rest her soul. And,
I couldn't have done any of this without Mary. She was wonderful. Amen. We had 7 children, as you probably know. The youngest one is Charles, who was a Down syndrome child, and he lives with Muriel. Where's Muriel?
It's right behind you. Everybody, if you don't know Muriel, this is Father Mike's daughter.
That's my daughter Muriel. She helped put this book together. She did all the... She took all the pictures. She was my photographer, and she did all the artwork in the book. And this has been a wonderful backup to me for the whole project. I had, as I say, 7 children, 6 boys, and 1 girl. That is the formula that God had for my family.
He said I was the rose among the thorns.
One girl equals 6 boys, and that was our family. Okay.
All right.